The sun blazed overhead as the Vanguard gently touched down on the alien planet's surface. Captain J. Sparrow stared out through the small viewport of his command chair, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape. It had taken them 6 months to reach this world, a journey across the stars, and now they had arrived at the most mysterious planet ever discovered. No other human had set foot here before, and the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization awaited them. He felt a mixture of excitement and unease. This planet was untouched, its ancient secrets waiting to be unearthed, yet something about it felt wrong. The planet had no name, at least not in the way humans knew names. It was catalogued as Theta 9 by the Galactic Mapping Association, a designation that meant little in the grand scheme of things. The expedition was one of the most important missions of Earth's space program. If they succeeded in uncovering the secrets of this alien race, humanity would unlock knowledge that could propel them beyond their current limitations. But there was also danger. Untold dangers. Pharaoh was certain. No ancient civilization simply vanished without a reason. "Captain, we've landed," Lieutenant Dana Reeves said, breaking Pharaoh's reverie. He turned to see her standing in the doorway of the bridge, her face tight with tension. She was the second in command of the mission, and although Pharaoh trusted her instincts, he couldn't help but notice the caution in her eyes. She had been quiet since their arrival, her silence more telling than any words could be. Pharaoh gave her a nod. "Prepare the team."
"We're heading out to the ruins." The crew had been briefed on the mission for months, but now that they were here in the heart of this ancient world, the weight of it was sinking in.
They had come to explore, to find anything that might explain the sudden disappearance of an entire alien race. The ruins lay not far from their landing site, a series of towering structures built from materials Pharaoh didn't recognize. The architecture was unlike anything the crew had seen before, and the city was eerily silent, as if it had been abandoned long ago and never disturbed.
The team gathered in the airlock. Pharaoh, Reeves, and a handful of other crew members suited up in their exploration gear.
They were heading into the unknown, and though they were well trained for such situations, the unknown always had a way of making them uneasy. Pharaoh looked at each of them, his mind racing. He had been the one to insist they continue, to ignore the subtle warnings in the mission briefings about the dangers of this place. But he had seen the potential in what this world might hold. If they were able to uncover even a fraction of what this civilization had achieved, it would change humanity forever. The doors of the Vanguard opened, and the team stepped out onto the dusty surface of Theta 9. Pharaoh felt a strange stillness in the air, an oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. The ground beneath his boots was cracked, the remains of ancient streets stretching out in all directions. Tall, jagged columns of alien stone stood like silent sentinels in the distance, their surfaces smooth and polished, despite the apparent age. The ruins seemed untouched, preserved for millennia by the very isolation that had kept them hidden from the rest of the galaxy. They made their way to the heart of the ruins, where the largest structure stood, a pyramid-like shape that rose above the rest, its peak shrouded in a faint mist. Pharaoh's eyes narrowed. The structure called to him, a pull he couldn't quite explain. It was as if it were waiting for him.
"This is it," Pharaoh said, his voice low as he surveyed the entrance.
"We've found it. The heart of their civilization." Reeves stepped beside him. "There's something strange about this place. It's too perfect. Almost like it was built for a purpose we can't understand." Pharaoh glanced at her. "It was built for a reason, Dana. We just have to figure out what that reason is." They entered the pyramid-like structure, stepping carefully through an archway that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Inside, the walls were covered in intricate carvings, symbols and shapes that appeared to be a language of sorts, but one Pharaoh couldn't decipher. The air inside was cool, the faintest hum resonating through the stone. It was almost as if the place were alive, breathing with the energy of something long past. At the center of the chamber, a pedestal stood, and on that pedestal rested an object that immediately caught Pharaoh's attention. It was a small geometric artifact, no larger than a human hand. It shimmered with an iridescent glow, the edges of the object shifting as though it were made of liquid rather than solid material. The artifact was beautiful in its simplicity, but there was something unsettling about it. Its smooth surface reflected the dim light, casting strange shadows on the walls. "This is it," Pharaoh whispered. "This is the artifact." Reeves moved closer, her brow furrowed. "The one we were warned about." In the research materials, the expedition had been briefed on the dangers of disturbing certain artifacts. This one in particular had been marked as potentially dangerous. The alien race that had once inhabited the planet had left behind warnings in their ancient texts, warnings that seemed almost prophetic. They had written in a language that could still be understood, the words, "Do not touch it."
It will change everything. Pharaoh hesitated for a moment, his eyes fixed on the artifact.
The words of warning echoed in his mind, but they were distant, almost irrelevant. He had come this far. He wasn't about to turn back now. "We're here to uncover their knowledge, not be afraid of their warnings," he muttered to himself. The pull of the artifact was too strong, too powerful. He reached forward, his hand trembling slightly, but with determination. The moment his fingers brushed against the surface of the artifact, a jolt of energy shot through his body, and he gasped in surprise. The air around them seemed to crackle with electricity. The hum that had filled the chamber grew louder, and the walls began to glow, as if reacting to the presence of the artifact. Pharaoh pulled his hand back, but it was too late. The change had already begun. "What did you do?" Reeves demanded, stepping back. She looked at the artifact, her face pale. "You weren't supposed to touch it, Jace." Pharaoh ignored her. He was too absorbed in the strange sensation coursing through him. The artifact's energy had surged into his body, and now he could feel it. His skin tingled, his muscles tightened, and his senses seemed to heighten. Colors appeared brighter, sounds sharper, and every movement felt more intense. He looked at his hands, his heart pounding in his chest. Was it possible? Could this small artifact truly do what it seemed to promise? The ground trembled beneath them. The entire structure seemed to shift, as if waking from a long slumber. The walls glowed brighter, and Pharaoh felt a wave of euphoria flood his senses. He had never felt anything like it before. Power. Knowledge. Everything was at his fingertips. "We need to get out of here," Reeves urged. "This place is dangerous, Jace." Pharaoh, however, was caught in the rush of power. "No. This is what we came for. But this is the breakthrough we've been waiting for." As Pharaoh stood there, absorbed in the strange power of the artifact, he failed to notice the subtle changes happening around him. The air, once still and heavy, now felt charged, alive. And as he turned to look at his team, he saw the expressions on their faces change. Fear, awe, and something else. Something darker. But it was too late. The damage was done. The artifact had rewritten something deep inside them all. The crew had touched the unknown. And with that one human action, the fate of an entire species was about to change forever. The Vanguard floated quietly in the cold void of space. The planet Theta 9 was now a distant shrinking ball of blue and gray in the viewport. Inside the ship, a heavy silence settled over the crew as they returned from the planet's surface. Captain Jace Pharaoh sat alone in his command chair, his fingers resting lightly on the armrests. He was deep in thought, the strange sensation he had felt on the planet still lingering inside him. It was as if something had awoken within him, something that pulsed with power, with life. Lieutenant Dana Reeves stood nearby, staring at the console. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone horribly wrong. She had seen the way Pharaoh's hand had touched the artifact, how the energy had surged through him. She had seen the change in his eyes. He had been consumed by it, entranced by its power. But what worried her most was how the rest of the crew had reacted. The changes weren't just happening to Pharaoh. "It's getting worse, Dana." Pharaoh's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, his face as calm as ever. But there was something different about him, something almost unnatural. His eyes were too sharp, too bright. "I can feel it," he continued, walking toward her. "The artifact. It's changing me." Reeves glanced at him, her expression conflicted. "Jace, this isn't just about you anymore. The whole crew is starting to feel it. You saw the readings. Something is happening to us all." Pharaoh's lips tightened, but he didn't speak. Instead, he turned away, looking out at the vastness of space through the viewport. He didn't need to hear the warning again. He had already felt it, deep inside. Something was shifting within him, something beyond his control. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't want to. What mattered now was the potential, what they could achieve, what they could become. The power, the knowledge, all of it was there, within his grasp. He could feel it growing, pulsating, urging him to push further, to seek more. The other crew members didn't understand. They were frightened. They were afraid of the change. But Pharaoh wasn't afraid. He welcomed it. "We need to run more tests," he said, his voice cold but determined. "We need to know what this artifact really is. The more we understand it, the better control we'll have over what's happening to us." Reeves shook her head. "Jace, you're not thinking clearly. We need to stop this before it's too late. We can't let it take over." But Pharaoh was already moving toward the lab, his mind set. The door slid open, and he stepped inside, followed closely by Reeves. The rest of the crew had gathered there, their faces filled with a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. The artifact, resting on its pedestal in the center of the room, glowed softly, as if it were waiting for them. Pharaoh approached it, his fingers itching to touch it again. He knew the risk, but the allure was too strong. He had to understand it. The crew had seen its power, felt its pull. It had already started changing them all, and yet none of them could resist. "Captain, you can't," Lieutenant Reeves said, her voice shaky. Pharaoh didn't answer. He reached out and placed his hand on the artifact once more. This time, the surge of energy was stronger, more intense. Pharaoh gasped as the power flooded into him, but this time, it was different. His body didn't feel the same as before. It felt more alive, more connected to the artifact, as if it had become a part of him. His thoughts sharpened, his senses heightened. He could feel the pulse of energy, the hum of the artifact, deep within his core. The others in the room watched, in silence. Some of them flinched as they felt the energy, but none of them dared speak. They all knew that Pharaoh had crossed a line. They had warned him, but now they were just as trapped as he was. "Jace," Reeves said, her voice pleading, "you have to stop. We don't know what this thing is doing to us." "We don't know what it's doing to you." Pharaoh turned to face her, his eyes burning with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "You don't understand, Dana. This is what we were meant for. This is our evolution. The humans of the future will look back on this moment as the dawn of a new era." "But at what cost?" Reeves asked, her voice shaking with fear. "The readings, Jace. People are starting to change. The physical changes are subtle, but they're happening. And it's not just you. It's all of us." Pharaoh paused. He had noticed it too. There was a change in the air, something unexplainable. The crew members were acting differently. Some of them were showing signs of heightened awareness, sharper senses, increased strength, faster reflexes. Others were more restless, agitated, as if the artifact had triggered something deep within them. Pharaoh could feel it too, a quiet buzzing under his skin, a hum in the back of his mind. The artifact had rewired them all, reprogramming their very biology. "We're changing," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. We're becoming something better. Reeves shook her head. This isn't better. It's dangerous.
We need to destroy the artifact before it destroys us.
Pharaoh turned to face the rest of the crew. He could see the doubt in their eyes, the fear. Some of them were already starting to feel the pull of the artifact, their eyes darting toward it with curiosity. Others were recoiling, instinctively trying to distance themselves from its power. It was clear that the crew was divided, and that division was growing by the minute.
We're not destroying it,
Pharaoh said, his voice firm.
We're keeping it. We need to study it.
We need to understand it. Only then will we know how to control it. The crew members exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to respond. They were trapped in a delicate balance, teetering between fear and fascination. Some of them were willing to follow Pharaoh, trusting that he had their best interests at heart. But others, those who had not yet felt the full effect of the artifact, were unsure. They saw the changes in Pharaoh, in each other, and it scared them. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the tension thick in the air. Pharaoh stood there, his fingers still resting lightly on the artifact, his mind racing. He could feel the power flowing through him, expanding his thoughts, expanding his perception. It was as if the artifact was a door to a whole new universe, and he had only just begun to understand its secrets. "Captain, we need to make a decision," Lieutenant Reeves said quietly. "We can't keep going like this. We have to stop." But Pharaoh was already lost in his thoughts, his mind consumed by the artifact's power. He could feel the energy thrumming through him, a constant hum that resonated deep within his chest. It was as if the artifact was calling to him, urging him to take the next step. He had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to stop.
Not now, not ever. Get the others ready,
Pharaoh said, his voice cold and commanding. We're not leaving. We're going to unlock the full potential of this artifact, and when we do, we'll be unstoppable. Reeves opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. She could see the madness in Pharaoh's eyes now, the obsession. He wasn't the man she had once known. He was something else, something changed, something dangerous. The rest of the crew watched in silence as Pharaoh turned away, his mind already set on the next phase of their mission. They were no longer explorers, no longer just humans seeking knowledge. They were something more, something else. And there was no turning back. As the crew prepared to continue their experiments, none of them could have predicted the true cost of their actions. The artifact had only just begun to change them, and what lay ahead was beyond anything they could have imagined. The air inside the Vanguard had shifted. It was charged with a strange electric energy that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. The crew members could feel it now, an invisible force pressing in on them, changing them in ways they couldn't yet understand. And as the ship drifted further into the unknown reaches of space, they knew one thing for certain. They had unleashed something far beyond their control. They had touched the forbidden, and the price would be higher than any of them could have imagined. The Vanguard drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its systems operating smoothly despite the growing chaos within the ship. The crew was no longer what they had been when they first set foot on Theta 9. The changes had spread, slowly at first, then rapidly. The once eager explorers were now divided. Some embraced the transformation the artifact had brought, while others struggled to keep control over their own minds and bodies. Captain Jace Pharaoh stood before the large viewport in the command center, staring out into the endless dark of space. His reflection in the glass was distorted, his sharp eyes glowing unnaturally bright. The change was undeniable. He could feel it in every fiber of his being, the power coursing through him, rewiring his thoughts and instincts. He had never felt so alive, so aware. But there was a price. His mind flickered with thoughts that weren't his own, memories that weren't real. The artifact had unlocked something deep inside him, something primal. The power it gave him felt like a gift, yet it came with a constant hunger, an urge to push further, to dig deeper. He wasn't sure if it was his own desire anymore or the artifact's influence. "Captain, we need to talk," Lieutenant Dana Reeves said, stepping into the room. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of fear behind it. Pharaoh turned to face her. She was still the same lieutenant he had trusted, but even she had begun to change. Her movements were sharper, her gaze more intense, and yet there was something off, a subtle unease that she couldn't shake. Pharaoh didn't respond immediately. His eyes lingered on her for a moment, studying her, noting the slight difference in the way she carried herself. There was no denying it. She too had felt the artifact's power, the subtle change in her features, the heightened sense of awareness in her eyes. They were all changing, each in their own way. "Jace," Reeves repeated, a touch more urgently this time.
"We can't keep going like this. The crew is falling apart."
Some of us are starting to experience physical changes, heightened senses, strength. Others are showing signs of instability.
"You've seen it yourself."
Pharaoh's expression hardened. He had felt it too. The strange sensations in his body were becoming more pronounced every day. His senses were sharper than they had ever been. His hearing, his sight, even his sense of touch. He could feel the heartbeat of the ship, the hum of its engines, as if they were a part of him. The crew members were no different. Some of them had gained strength, their bodies becoming more resistant to fatigue. Others, however, had become more erratic, struggling to control the urges that the artifact had awakened.
"I know what I'm doing, Dana," Pharaoh said, his voice low and steady, though there was a distant edge to it. "We've only just begun to understand the potential of what we've found."
"This is the next step in human evolution." Reeves shook her head. "We don't know what it's doing to us."
The changes. This isn't natural. It's altering us in ways we can't control. And I don't think we fully understand the consequences yet. Pharaoh took a step closer, his eyes narrowing slightly as he regarded her. He had always respected Reeves. She was logical, cautious, and grounded. But now, in this new reality, her reluctance seemed like weakness. She was fighting the change, resisting the very thing that could elevate them all. "You're afraid," Pharaoh said softly. "Afraid of becoming something more. You don't have to fight it, Dana. Embrace it. This is what we were always meant to become." "I don't want to become like this," she replied, her voice trembling just slightly. "I don't want to lose control." Pharaoh's gaze softened for a moment, and he placed a hand on her shoulder.
"You don't have to lose control, Dana.
You just have to trust it. Trust me. Together, we can unlock everything this artifact has to offer." The door to the command center slid open, and the rest of the crew stepped in. Their faces were a mix of fear, fascination, and uncertainty. They had all felt the effects of the artifact, some more intensely than others, but none of them could deny the power it had unlocked in them, the potential that had been awakened. Lieutenant Marcus Torres was the first to speak. His voice was unsteady, but his eyes gleamed with a strange intensity. "Captain, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up.
Some of us are
Changing too quickly. We're losing ourselves. There are moments when I feel like I'm not even human anymore." Pharaoh looked at him, his expression unreadable.
"You're not just human anymore, Marcus."
None of us are. We're evolving, becoming something new. Something better. "Better," Torres repeated, his voice rising with disbelief.
How can we be better when we're losing our humanity? Some of us can't even control the changes happening to us.
Pharaoh took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had to stay calm, stay focused. The artifact was the key to everything. If they could just unlock its full potential, they would no longer be bound by the limitations of their old selves. But there was a growing concern, an undeniable feeling that the crew was on the brink of something they couldn't return from.
We're not losing ourselves,
Pharaoh said, his voice firm. We are becoming something more, something humanity has only dreamed of. The crew exchanged nervous glances, their uncertainty growing. Pharaoh's words were confident, but his eyes betrayed a sense of doubt, a flicker of fear. He knew the crew was slipping away from him. Some were embracing the changes, while others were afraid. The division was becoming too clear, too dangerous.
We need to destroy the artifact, Reeves said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's the only way to stop this.
We need to go back to Earth, to find a way to reverse what's happening before it's too late.
No,
Pharaoh snapped, his voice sharp.
We're not destroying it. You're not listening, Dana.
This is the future. We can't turn back now.
We've come too far. The tension in the room was palpable.
The crew stood at a crossroads, each of them torn between the fear of losing their humanity and the allure of the power the artifact offered. Some had already given in, their minds consumed by the artifact's influence. Others, like Reeves and Torres, were still fighting to hold on to the lives they had known, still holding on to the hope that they could find a way to stop the changes before they lost everything. We're running out of time, Torres said, his voice quiet but full of urgency.
The changes are accelerating. We don't know how much longer we can resist.
Pharaoh's eyes flashed with frustration. I'm not resisting. I'm evolving. Reeve stepped forward, her voice pleading. Jace, please, you have to see reason. The artifact is dangerous. It's changing us, and we can't control it. But Pharaoh's mind was made up. The artifact was the key to everything. It had shown him glimpses of a future beyond anything they had ever imagined. Why would he ever turn back from that? Why would he choose to remain the same when he could be so much more? I'm not going to let fear hold me back, he said, his voice firm, almost cold. We're going forward, no matter what it takes. The crew was silent. Reeves and Torres exchanged a look, their faces filled with concern. They knew what needed to be done, but Pharaoh's obsession with the artifact was clouding his judgment. The changes were happening too quickly, and there was no telling what the long-term consequences would be. They couldn't just stand by and watch as Pharaoh led them into danger. I'm not gonna let this destroy us, Reeves said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. But Pharaoh didn't hear her. He was already lost in the power of the artifact, his thoughts consumed by the possibilities it offered. The crew had become divided. Some were drawn to the artifact's power, while others fought to hold on to their humanity. The tension in the room grew, the lines between them becoming clearer with each passing day. And as the Vanguard continued its journey through the stars, none of them could see the danger that was closing in. The artifact had already changed them, and what lay ahead was something none of them could have predicted. The consequences of their actions were just beginning, and none of them could stop the chain of events that had been set in motion. The hum of the Vanguard's engines was the only sound that filled the quiet corridors. The ship was running smoothly, but the atmosphere was far from peaceful. The crew had been on edge ever since they touched the artifact, and now the changes were no longer just physical. There was something darker settling in, something that couldn't be ignored. Captain Jace Pharaoh stood in the command center, staring at the blinking consoles. His mind raced, thoughts colliding in an endless loop. He could feel the artifact's power inside him, its energy coursing through every part of his body. It had made him more than human, but the price of that power was steep. The lines between the man he had been and the being he was becoming were blurring, and he couldn't stop it. He didn't want to stop it. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of the artifact flickered before him. It called to him. He knew the truth now. The future was here, and it was within his grasp. But as much as he wanted to embrace it, he couldn't shake the growing unease in his chest. The artifact had given him power, yes, but at what cost? What was happening to the rest of the crew? What had he unleashed? Captain, we need to talk, Lieutenant Dana Reeves said, entering the room. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Pharaoh turned to face her, studying her carefully. She was still the same lieutenant he had known, but there was something different. He could see it in her eyes. Fear, uncertainty, and something else. Something harder to define. She had changed, too. We've already talked, Dana, Pharaoh replied, his voice steady, but there was an underlying tension. We can't go back now. We're too far in. Reeves didn't answer immediately. She glanced at the console, then back at him. Her expression conflicted.
Jace, I'm scared. I'm scared for you.
The rest of the crew is losing their grip. We're changing, but not in the way you think.
Some of us are getting stronger, but others, they're losing themselves.
Pharaoh clenched his jaw. He had seen it. He had felt it. The changes were happening too quickly. Some of the crew members had already begun to show signs of instability. Mood swings, erratic behavior, uncontrollable urges. They were no longer themselves. He had felt the pull, the hunger for more. It was a constant gnawing sensation that never let up. But the others? The ones who resisted the change. They were struggling. You're afraid, Pharaoh said quietly. You don't understand what we're becoming.
This isn't weakness, Dana. This is evolution.
Evolution? Reeves repeated, her voice shaking. Is that what you think this is? We're losing our humanity. What happens when the changes go too far? What happens when we can't turn back? Pharaoh turned away from her, his eyes narrowing. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear the fear in her voice. We won't lose our humanity, he said, though the words felt hollow even to him. We're becoming more. We're becoming what we were always meant to be. Reeves stepped closer, her hand gripping the edge of the console. You're not yourself, Jace. I've watched you change. We've all watched you. You're losing touch with reality. You're not thinking clearly. Pharaoh didn't respond. Instead, he stared at the artifact, which was still resting in its containment chamber. It pulsed with a faint, almost hypnotic light. It was as if it were alive, calling to him, urging him to take the next step. The power was there, waiting, and all he had to do was accept it. You have to stop this, Jace, Reeves said softly, before it's too late.
We need to destroy the artifact before it changes us beyond recognition. I'm begging you.
I'm begging you to see reason. But Pharaoh couldn't see reason. His mind was clouded, consumed by the artifact's power. It was his, and no one could take it from him. He had come this far. He had made a decision, and nothing was going to change that. We can't destroy it, Dana, Ferraro said, his voice cold. The artifact is the key to everything. It's the future. You can't see it, but I can.
We're on the edge of something incredible. We can't turn back now.
Reeves' face twisted with frustration and fear. You're wrong, Jace. The future you're seeing isn't the one we were meant to have.
You're not thinking about the consequences. The crew is falling apart.
We're losing control. We're becoming monsters. Pharaoh shook his head, refusing to acknowledge her words. No, Dana, we're becoming gods. The silence that followed was heavy. Reeves looked at him, her heart sinking. She had never seen him like this. The man she had known, the captain she had trusted, was slipping away. The artifact had taken hold of him, and now he was beyond saving. She had to stop him, before it was too late. We need to act fast, she said, her voice barely a whisper, before anyone else changes.
We have to destroy the artifact. We can't risk losing everyone.
But Pharaoh didn't listen. He turned away from her, walking toward the artifact. His hand hovered over the containment chamber, as if he were drawn to it, as if it were the only thing that mattered. He wasn't ready to let go. He couldn't. Not now. The power was too intoxicating. The potential too great. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had embraced the change, and now nothing could stop him.
Jace, please!
Reeves begged, but it was too late. The doors to the command center slid open, and the rest of the crew filed in. Their faces were a mix of fear and uncertainty. But they, too, had felt the pull of the artifact. Some of them had embraced it, just as Pharaoh had, while others were still struggling to hold on to their humanity.
I'm not going to let you do this,
Lieutenant Marcus Torres said, his voice tight with anger.
We're not going to let you destroy what's left of us.
The artifact is changing us, but it's not too late to stop. We have to destroy it.
Destroy it?
Pharaoh said, his voice cold. You don't understand, Marcus. We're on the verge of something greater than you could ever imagine. We're becoming what humanity was always meant to be.
You're just afraid. You can't see the bigger picture.
Torre stepped forward, his fists clenched.
No. Jace, you're the one who's afraid.
You're afraid of what's happening to you. You're afraid of losing control.
But you've already lost it. We're not following you anymore.
You've lost us.
The words stung, but Pharaoh refused to show any weakness. He had made his decision. The crew had become divided, and he knew that this was the moment. The moment where they would either embrace the change or be left behind. There was no middle ground.
I don't need any of you,
Pharaoh said, his voice rising.
I don't need anyone to understand.
This is my destiny, and I won't let anyone stand in my way.
Reeve stepped forward, her face set in determination.
Then we'll stop you, Jace.
We'll stop you before you destroy everything.
Pharaoh's eyes flashed with fury. He wasn't about to let them take the artifact from him. Not now. Not ever. The power was his, and nothing could take it away. The crew had made their choice. They had chosen to resist, to fight against the very thing that could elevate them beyond the limits of their old selves. But Pharaoh wasn't going to let them stand in his way. He wasn't going to let anything stop him from embracing the future. The tension in the room was thick, and for a moment, no one moved. The crew had become divided, torn between those who wanted to embrace the change and those who feared it. But there was no turning back now. The artifact had rewritten everything, and in the end, it was clear that no one would leave unchanged. The price of power was high, and Pharaoh was ready to pay it.